Hello everyone.
Hello everybody.
I'm being mauled to death at the moment, so you have to excuse me.
We've got a little beast in the house.
It's not ours, but
no, it's not ours.
We're dog sitting.
Look at this little fella. He's got loads of extra skin on here.
He's a little French bulldog.
Little Frenchie.
Hello. And his name's Winston.
Winston, yeah.
Hello, Winston.
He's bottom of the what's he called?
The food chain.
The food chain.
Shark bait,
yeah,
Mark
shark
calls him. He's 8 weeks and he's gorgeous, but he's going through that. I want to chew everything in sight. So Auntie Charlotte's going to be to the rescue. It's our daughter Sophie's puppy, and she's at work today. So
we're looking after him.
So she's gonna
there we are.
Come and take him, Auntie Charlotte.
Take him away.
You probably come around that way, babe Bella, so I can't reach you.
So there we go.
Say hello.
Say hello. So he's now world famous. There you go. Off you go.
Hello, Auntie Charlotte.
Yeah.
Bye bye, Mummy.
Well, we thought we'd come on today.
Bye bye, Grandma.
To talk about an incident that happened going back quite a long time ago now, but there's a bigger picture to this, so we'd like to share it with you. And really, if we can just take you back to a few months after we were disfellowshipped, and we'd been disfellowshipped. I think it was, I don't know, I'm taking a guess now.
A few months.
It must have been like 6 months.
Because I think we had been disfellowshipped in the September. And I think that this was happening at the beginning of the following year, wasn't it? Because he'd gone through. What was ironic is he'd actually gone through a Christmas.
It was many months.
Yeah, many months.
Of being disfellowshipped. And of course, although we were disfellowshipped, we went to every meeting, and we made sure we
didn't miss one.
We didn't miss any meetings. We were always the last to get in there and the first to leave, so we didn't interrupt anybody. And that was going to be our play until such times as we were reinstated. Anyway, this particular incident is about a lady called what should we call her?
Mrs. D.
Mrs. D. We'll call her Mrs. D. I'm not going to name her because it's not.
No, but at the same time, you can't relay personal experiences without relaying the involvement of the ones around you at the time.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about experiences, because we were Jehovah's Witnesses, it's very difficult to tell your experiences without having to bring other people into it.
Yeah.
So we will not tell you her proper name, but we'll call her Mrs. D, and she knows very well who this person is. She'll watch the video of whoever she does, or even ones who know us will go, oh, do you know who this is about? Because they're all full of gossip and intrigue, so they'll want to watch it anyway. But
they will.
We could quite easily go to town and tell you names, but we won't.
What's the point?
No.
We love this lady. I worked with her for, I was in the job for 10 years, so, and I always got on well with her, and I thought the world of her. So, and I still do, and her husband. So this is not about disrespecting her, but what it is about doing is sharing with you just an experience of something where the watchtower can interfere. The watchtower can put you in all sorts of trouble very, very quickly, and leave you quite devastated. Now we've called her Mrs. D. This is about an incident, as I said, we're many months into disfellowshipping, and this one particular day I'm wearing my suit, I'm at work, it's first thing in the morning, I've just arrived. My position was then the Assistant General Secretary. I was basically the manager of all of the staff, bar the boss himself.
Because the boss, within the work that Mark was in, wasn't there very often.
No.
Because he was London-based. So, Mark basically ran the office and was in line to take over from the boss, I think, towards the end of that year.
Yeah.
So he would have been...
That was the sort of plan that we were looking at, and so the boss would come down once a fortnight and we'd have meetings and everything. So, I was basically in charge, and I was in phone calls with him every day. And this is the type of relationship we had. And it was a good working relationship. So, but this one particular day, I'd come into the office and Mrs. D said, Mark, I need to have a word with you. And I thought, oh, okay. And it's obviously something to do with, can I see you outside by the front door? And I said, sure. So we went out to the front door and I said, good morning, Carol. How are you? She said, fine, thank you. And she was I could see that she was building up for something, very, very clear by her body language and her abruptness, basically. There was no smile. She looked as if she was ready to be assertive about something. So I said, what's on your mind? And she said, because of your disfellowshipping and the ongoing need to stay separate from you, I'm making it clear to you now, I'm not going to get into a car with you to go on trips to other sites. So I said, right, okay, So you're not. What you're saying is then you're not going to get in a car with me if we need to go down to Southampton or to Birmingham or to any of the other sites that we sometimes have to, on a weekly basis, go to in order to meet up with the membership. Now, quite often we would all get into one car and travel, especially on the shorter trips, to particular destinations together on the grounds that it was saving petrol, and it was just economies of scale. It was the right thing to do. Everybody gets in the one car and away you go. No, this particular lady, Mrs. D, decided, because you're disfellowshipped, I'm not getting in a car with you. Now, that was quite profound to hear that from Mrs. D, and the reason it was profound is because the type of work that we're involved in is employment law, UK employment law. Part of my job, well, in fact, the only part of my job, the part that I was actually employed to do, was to mediate between employers and employees, find the win-win for everybody within a conflict situation at work, within the employment arena. And we had many techniques that we would use in order to find the right solutions, and we were very good at what we did. Now, that also meant being well versed in employment law and how contracts of employment work and how obligations and terms and conditions work for an employee as well as the employer. So for Mrs. D to suddenly announce to the world that she was no longer going to sit in a car with me was basically saying that for this particular juncture of our working relationship, I refuse to now cooperate, as I have always done in the past, to get into a mode of transport with you to go to a destination. And the reason why? Because of a religious difference, because I was now disfellowshipped, which had absolutely no connection or association or affiliation with the employment that we were doing.
Now I'd just like to add there were other Jehovah's Witnesses that also worked within this office environment, to which one particular lady, we call her Mrs. D as well,
Right.
Was really, really good. And she completely treated Mark as she should have done, which was completely non-spiritual side of it, just completely got down to the job. And did her job. And to this day, Mark says that he was really admired the way that she carried on, and just the professional side of it was one thing and the religious side was another.
Quite
She
another.
separated the two completely, which is what you should do.
Yeah, in fact, I would do her appraisals every
Yeah.
6 months, and we got on fine, and it was all very professional, and it was to do with work. Now, what Mrs. D did was actually something that became very, very serious. I did say to her straight afterwards, are you sure you know what you're saying here, Mrs. D? In fact, I didn't call her Mrs. D, I called her by her first name. I said, because what you're now announcing is actually a very serious position that you're putting yourself in. The reason it's a very serious position that you're putting yourself in is because I now need to report that to the General Secretary for him to make a decision on. Now, let me explain exactly what that means for those that aren't well versed in employment law, and I'll keep this very simple. What she was doing basically was discriminating against me on the grounds of a religious difference. Now, in this country, we have some very strict rules on discrimination issues, especially to do with gender and to do with race and also religion. So to go down this road and for this particular trade that we're in to be supporting that, for the boss to be supporting that, would actually make him vicariously liable for any actions that then occur as a result of her decision to remove herself from the workplace, and the workplace being a mode of transport in order to get there. It was also blatant discrimination, and she wasn't hiding it. So there were two forms.
In fact, I think I'd go even further than that, and I just said that she was viewing that as an absolute stance, and almost wanted a pat on the back for her obvious stance with regards to where she...
I'm standing up for Jehovah,
yeah.
and I'm now willing to fall on my own sword if I have to, in order to do that. Now, straight away, I went into not a heightened flight, but I had to work out the chess moves here, because the first thing that could happen is that she could immediately be suspended from work as a result of that, without a shadow of a doubt. Secondly, letters would be written up and a disciplinary hearing, an investigation would be heard first, followed by a disciplinary hearing, of which I know that Mrs. D would just follow through with the same things that she'd told me, and she would tell the boss when she was in that disciplinary hearing. And she would probably find herself either on the end of a final warning or even more, be dismissed. Why? Well, I'll tell you why. Because of the law work that we did, it's very clear that if I wanted to take this further, I could have done. I could have said, right, if my boss doesn't do anything about this, then I'm being discriminated against, and therefore I can raise a grievance against my employer. And at the first instance, the minute I can see that there is nothing going to be complied with, I can then constructively dismiss myself. Now, it's a dangerous step to take, but I could have done that. Based on my position also, it would have added weight within the court as to reasonable actions being taken on my part because of my authority being put under question and undermined. So there are a number of different facets that come into this. Now, I was already thinking of all those moves, and I thought, well, my boss, who is also extremely astute, and I learnt a lot from him, would have said the same things. And so I said to Mrs. D, I'm going to have to report this. But I already had it in my mind how to offset and mitigate for her.
Little did she know.
She didn't know what was coming.
Yeah.
And I was already defending her, even though she was discriminating against me, because I didn't want her to lose her job. I didn't want her family. She was on a full-time wage. I didn't want her to lose her money, her salary. And I thought the world of her husband and her kids. So, no, this was a disastrous move that she was making. And now, the ironic thing about it is, I'm now going to have to defend her, even though she's now perpetrating this discrimination against my person. So,
but we were going to every single meeting at the time as well. So even though we'd been disfellowshipped for getting married, and other witnesses at Mark's work were distinguishing the difference between a working relationship and a spiritual relationship, because at the end of the day, when someone is disfellowshipped, even in the Jehovah's Witness religion, it's the spiritual contact. But you see, it's just recently that they've emphasised that you shouldn't even have physical contact or anything else. But at the time, it wasn't still on the cards, because this was way before 2011, which is when the article came up about mentally diseased and all that. So even that, they should have changed. They should have done the difference between the two things. But she decided to take it that little step extra, because obviously that will incur extra brownie points within the congregation. So I think that's why she did it, was for brownie points personally.
Well, I think you're probably right, but I don't think she would have understood, or she severely underestimated exactly
the weightiness of what she'd done.
She was committing a gross misconduct scene in front of my very eyes, and any gross misconduct can actually be deemed as a dismissible offence. If the employer decides that it is gross misconduct, or perceives that it's gross misconduct, and the trust and confidence has then been eroded to that degree, he is well within his rights to dismiss her. And he has to do that, or take severe action, in order to protect the other employee, which in this case was me, let alone me. So this was a very big position that the boss was now being put in by Mrs. D, and she had no idea of the gravity of what a seismic change in her employment relationship with this employer was about to severely change. So I said, are you sure you don't want to retract this or think about this, Mrs. D? Because I have no alternative now but to report this to the boss. She said, nope, that's the way it's going to be. And I said, okay. So the boss was due in, and I did speak to him straight away. I said, I need to speak to you very quickly. And we had a private meeting. And I let him know, and I've explained to him what I've just explained to you out there now on the camera. He sat very quietly, as the boss always does, thought about very quickly. I could see his mind working, all of the different chess plays going on, and said, that's it, she's sacked. We'll have to have her in for a disciplinary, and unless she changes her mind and goes through some form of complete, I'm really sorry, I didn't know what I was doing, if she carries on this stance, then she is dismissed from the employer of this business. With that, her manager was brought in, who I also got on very well with. And I then had to explain to her manager.
And her manager also has a sister who is a Jehovah's Witness, and brother-in-law who is also one of the ones that's very, very closely involved with a lot of our other stories.
The other dealings.
Because he used to like to stick his nose into our business well and truly. I think to be honest, a lot of the time some of the elders that did do that were just intrigued with what was going on in our lives.
Yeah, they were fascinated by it.
It's like it was the next episode of the Latham family. Yeah. It's like, what can we find out?
Come across as being very sad to me, a lot of them. But anyway, so
she understood the witness side of it. That's what I wanted to say about
she
that.
did, but she was shocked. Mrs. S was shocked at exactly because she wasn't aware that this was about to happen. So we had that discussion. We said, well, there's going to have to be a meeting. And a letter was written to her. The boss said, well, we need to suspend her straight away. And I said, no, don't do that. Please, don't do that to her. I'm asking you not to do that to her. And he said, well, I'm going to need another witness here for you because this needs to be witnessed what you're saying to her. I said, absolutely. So we got her manager in. And I said to Mrs. S, look, make sure that this, if she's going to have to go through a disciplinary because of what she's done, I do not want her sacked, and I certainly don't want her suspended. I just want her to be left alone, but with obviously a very serious warning if she doesn't retract what she says.
And an understanding of what it
why
is and
she's
the
done
weightiness,
it.
she said. Yeah.
She's gone too far, and she has discriminated against me. Anyway, the meeting was held, and she had a very serious warning added to her file. And that was, and she wouldn't change her mind, so she was put through that. If it wasn't for me, she would have been dismissed.
I don't think she actually would have ever realised that. I think that because even when Mark was finally reinstated, well, when we both were, but when Mark in his position at work was, she never really changed her attitude towards us, really, did she?
No.
And I know that's because of other Jehovah's Witnesses that took an umbrance to Mark and myself being married, and she almost took sides with regards to, well, I'm going to stand by that person. Not that there were sides, but these particular individuals made it like there was, because that's how they wanted to live their life. Sure. We never did that.
No.
It was just, well, in our case, everybody's exactly the same, and let's just get on with our individual lives. But unfortunately, these particular individuals couldn't do that.
No.
Because,
so going back to this point about where it was, and the irony is this, and here's the irony. Our role was to defend people against discrimination. That was the business we were in, whether it be gender, whether it be colour of your skin, race, creed, and she should have known this. But here goes the JW mental think. We're above all of that as Jehovah's Witnesses. We're above all of that. And if we want to discriminate, if we want to shun, we can do that because we have the right to do that. That's what they think in here. But underneath that, they are the first to make it very clear to exploit these laws and rules like we have in the United Nations about everybody's right
to religious difference,
to be able to think freely and not be punished for the way that they want to act in their lives towards a certain religious belief. And they are the first to be up there defending it. And yet here is an incident where an individual Jehovah's Witness decides to turn it on its head and say, well, that doesn't matter now because I know that you're the son of the devil, and therefore I have to isolate myself from you, no matter what it costs me. Well, I'm glad that the boss took the chance on this and decided to listen to what I had to say. And no, she wasn't dismissed, and no, her family didn't lose that salary because of the watchtower. And at the end of the day,
and also nobody outside of that office would have known what situation Mark was in and had actually pleaded for this other person's job to be saved.
No, they didn't know.
Even though, so if you were any type of other person than what you are, which is a loving person.
Thank you, honey.
You are.
Yeah.
Then he could have gone, well, I'm going to make a point now. And I'm going to make sure she, all of these realise that they can't do this type of thing to people.
Let's try to imagine what that would have done. Imagine that I was, right, I'm being vindictive. Let's be vindictive. She's put herself in that position. Now she can reap the whirlwind. Imagine I'd taken that attitude, and then she was put through a disciplinary, and I was demanding that she was removed from her post because this was putting a question mark over my authority with what I was being paid for. And she was dismissed for gross misconduct. Can you imagine how that would have gone down in the Kingdom Hall? Well, it would have been seen that she was being martyred.
Yeah.
She was being martyred for her faith, that this was ultimately persecution. And guess what? Ironically, it was down to me. And that's the way it would have been seen, even though it would have been her that was instigating and initiating this very profound and discriminatory decision against me. Incredible, but that's the way it would have panned out. Now, because we were trying to come back into those particular congregations at the time, I didn't want that heat. And I didn't want it on my family, and I certainly didn't want it on Mrs. D. I nearly said her name then. So I didn't want it. I just wanted it to die a death, and for her
to go away.
For not being such a silly fool, and just get on with her life and stop being such an idiot, because she was being an idiot on this day. She really was. And luckily, fortunately, it all turned out for the best.
Now, can I just say a couple of things about this particular lady? I know an awful lot about her family life, which I'm not going to go into because that's her business. But what I will mention, because it has a lot to do with the office, is this is somebody who wants to make an obvious stand for her faith. But come Christmas, when the end of year do happens at the work environment, she's the first one to put Christmas carols on in the office.
Yes, you are, Mrs. D.
Now, she's the first one to put the carols on.
You did enjoy the Christmas carols, didn't you?
Would she do that in her own home with an elder coming round? I don't think so.
No.
But she'll quite happily put them on in the office and be happy with them on in the office.
In fact, we used to have an end of year do, as we call it.
Because there was a few witnesses at work there.
So it wasn't called a Christmas do.
It was called an end
a Winterval. I think we called it a Winterval or something. Wintervals, anyway.
It's the same thing.
We were breaking up for Christmas, and so we'd have all this food laid out. And
what do they think Christmas is? It's part of the celebration of the. I tell you,
it's just. We won't call it that, but we'll still celebrate it. Well, I think there are lots of examples in the Bible about that sort of thing, aren't there? When it comes to watering something down just a little bit.
Yeah.
But anyway.
But it just makes me laugh, the fact that her stance would be so rigid and martyrdom.
Martyrdom.
Thank you. A martyrdom on that side of it, but when it came to things like Christmas, that's okay though.
Yeah.
Well, you can't do that.
And
you can't do that division between one thing and another. You're either all one way or all the other. You can't be on that fence.
This is what we're getting at with the JW mindset, the psyche that goes on. You make judgments in your own head as a Jehovah's Witness that I can get away with that, but I'll stand and I won't take that fraction, and I'll let my child die over there, but then I'll have Christmas over there, albeit in a different form. And these little quirks that come in, I'll get drunk every weekend, but I won't take blood. You can see where they get so twisted, where the religion doesn't help the individual to come through with some clear mental arithmetic, really, on the equations of life. And so they will radically make these decisions. And of course, we know through history now, the Watchtower has a habit of putting brothers and sisters in positions where they end up being discriminated against, and needlessly, because of certain situations in certain countries. Just one example, isn't it, love? But
it's just a
we wanted
experience,
to share it. We wanted to share it.
I said to Mark, it was one that I think he should share with everybody out there, because we've been in so many different situations throughout our life for different things, and that one, it just made me so, like, I just head shaky in the sense of just why she could be one way with one thing and then another. And as I said, at the time we were attending every single meeting, showing, and it was still in the same congregation as this particular sister, and yet the one that was actually okay at work was in a different congregation in the same hall. But she took it so she didn't know that we were going back to every meeting and making a right from the off a chance to come back and an opportunity to come back. I'm so glad that happened to us, because it gave us an opportunity to see the religion from an outsider's point of view. Going to that hall and being ignored like we were we were like flies on the wall. You know how sometimes you look at situations and go, I'd have loved to have been a fly on the wall.
Yeah.
We were, and because of that, we were able to look at situations very differently to what you are when you're a member of the congregation being love bombed.
Yeah.
So, you know, I thank them for disfellowshipping us.
Yeah. But it goes to show that the shunning is very real, but also here was a classic case of so-called worldly people seeing it in action. And in this case, because the law of the land said you can't discriminate against people, she was about to be dismissed. And it ironically took the so-called disfellowship one to save her from being dismissed. The very one that she wanted to shun, the very one that she thought was a hateful character and needed to stay away from. So I hope she does watch this. I share this to the outside world with love for this lady and her husband, who I think the world of. And I hope that they see it for what it is. Sometimes we all learn hard lessons, and for me this is how I saw it, and those are the facts in our employment. So there we go.
There we go. So we're going to say goodbye for now.
Thank you for listening.
Another video that this can come on to regarding finances and things like that, but we'll do a part 2, I think.
Yes.
Yes. Because otherwise it would be a far too long video.
It would.
Okay, we'll say bye-bye for now.
Thanks very much for listening.
And we'll speak to you soon.
Bye for now.
Take care. Bye.